On today's show, I'm very excited to be hosting a diverse panel discussion in recognition and in celebration of International Women's Day. This year's theme is Choose to Challenge, and it's an opportunity to choose to challenge gender bias and inequity, not only today, but every day. It's also an opportunity to celebrate women's accomplishments, their achievements, and to challenge ourselves by asking, what else can you do? We can choose to encourage and to inspire others, to show up, to step up, and to speak up, to be heard, to be seen, and to ask for what we want. In turn, harnessing our personal leadership to show up as the best version of ourselves. I believe that cultivating personal leadership begins with creating a powerful personal brand, developing your confidence, your brand identity, and your presence, which in turn positively impacts the way that you show up, because ultimately we are all equal. We all have value to bring to the table. We can achieve anything we put our minds to, and the possibilities are limitless. So I'd like to introduce you to our panel today. And first off, I'd like to introduce Gayathri Peria. Gayathri, good evening. You're joining us live from Singapore. And Gayathri is a business development and sales leader, the Director of Channels and Alliances for Oracle in the APJ region, and she has extensive sales experience in both the technology and telco industries. We then have Jacqui Ferguson. Good afternoon, Jacqui. And Jacqui is joining us here from the UK.
Hi, Leila.
Hi there. Great to have you here. And Jacqui is a portfolio non-executive director, chair and advisor, an experienced former divisional CEO and general manager with extensive global experience from the technology industry. And finally, last but not least, we have Todd Taylor, Professor Todd Taylor, in fact, from Indiana in the US. Good morning, Todd. Thank you for getting up extra early to join us today on this session. Really appreciate it. Todd is now a Notre Dame professor, and he's also a seasoned Fortune 50 business operations and transformation executive with over 30 years of experience in the technology, manufacturing, aerospace, automotive, and financial services industry. So hello, everyone. Great to have you here today. And thank you guys who are on the live today, and do say hello in the comments. Let me know where you are watching from, and also do chip in and ask any questions of the panel that you'd like to have them share today. And I'd like to kick off with the first question, and that is, with the theme of International Women's Day this year being Choose to Challenge, what can we do as individuals, do you feel, to challenge ourselves? And Gaia, I'd like to open this up to you first of all.
Thank you, Leila. It's a pleasure to meet every one of you online. Good evening from Singapore. So, well, I guess choosing to challenge is probably, everyone has a different viewpoint, but in my eyes, I guess chasing a differentiated norm is what I call choosing to challenge. And I guess if you do everything the same every other day, the learning curve is probably mundane, and that's something that's not in my DNA as an individual myself. So I guess I chose to do two things in my life that's different, and I'm continuous and disciplined till date to do that. One is I have great interest in languages, so I trained myself to speak 4 different languages and get myself certified. So that keeps me going every evening to do something different, where it captures a different mindset when I learn something that's, out of the blue, and it's not what I see on an email. It's not what I see when I talk on the phone. So it's something just completely different. And secondly, I've not been a huge fan of hiking and trekking in the past, but the last couple of years, in the last 5 years, I'm really thankful to many different individuals who motivated me, that I've even completed a winter climbing expedition in 2 different countries, in the Middle East and in Korea, just 1.5 years ago, when we all could have a life. And I think there's 2 things that I started to do differently about myself, just to cultivate an active mindset as a leader, and that also gives me a different perspective to share with individuals what I come across as I go through the new world of changing myself and challenging myself to do better. Back to you, Leela.
Thank you, Gaia. And let me ask you a question there. What is it that drives you to do that? To do all these things, to have that motivation behind you to do it? What is it that pushes you?
Well, I guess I have an ambition that, I have many ambitions. I can't tell you which, but it's not just in my career that I always wanted to be. I always wanted to be a leader who innovates and challenges the people around in my team and outside of my extended teams to think differently, to do something that's challenging the norm, and to produce a different effect, not just to build, your job and your career, but to just build a portfolio for yourself on what is that different about you that I can say if your next employer were to call me. What is it about you? So if you can't answer the question, I always tell them that then you need to do something different, right? So before I could tell people that, I have to do that myself. So that was what I started to do with myself, Leela.
Love it. Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. No, that's great. That's great. And Jacqui, what about yourself? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I guess when I think about choose to challenge, the one word that comes to mind for me is the word courage. I think that we can all, develop that ability to have more courage to take those risky opportunities that may advance us. But also, if you're in a position to be able to have courage to give opportunities to people who might not be, have the same level of experience as others. I think that word courage really resonates with me. Certainly when I go back to my own career journey, most of the big, deep advancements that I had the honor of taking required quite a bit of courage. So for example, when I was given the opportunity to go to the US to live and work with my family, working for the CEO and chairman at Hewlett Packard, that was a big step into the unknown for me and for my family. So we had to move my children, from the UK to the US. My husband had to quit his job. It was a big leap of faith to go into an environment where, frankly, I had no idea what I was doing, certainly for the first little while. And I would say, having had the courage to take that opportunity, it was probably the biggest learning experience of my life. Those 3 years in the US were like 5 MBAs all at the same time, but in real life. But it also advanced my family. My family had this opportunity to experience being a global citizen. Silicon Valley is kind of a melting pot of people from all over the world. So even when I sort of take a step back and look at it now, whilst it required that level of courage from the family as well as myself, it definitely paid off in terms of experiences, results, and overall a great opportunity. And I do think that we can all take that responsibility to have courage to challenge ourselves, but also to give other people those great opportunities.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you just grabbed the opportunity and you went for it. And tell me, if you're open to sharing, what was your biggest fear at the time when you made that decision?
Well, unfortunately, when I made the decision, I was a little fearless at the time. It was actually when I got there, I thought, oh, this is a terrible mistake, because it was so completely different from anything I'd done before. But I think it was having that courage, that resilience to actually make a success of it. But I promise you, the first 3 months were incredibly bumpy. But I think unless you are stretching yourselves, and I'm sure Professor Taylor will tell us about this as well, unless you're stretching yourself, you're not pushing yourself to see what you can actually achieve. So I would say in naivety, it was this will be great. In practice, it was really quite an interesting journey.
Yeah, no, and it's phenomenal. I think in terms of, just taking that step, fearless is a great word. It's just letting go and just go for it and see what happens, and asking yourself, what is the worst that can possibly happen, right? But thank you for sharing that. And Todd, what about you when it comes to the theme of Choose to Challenge?
Yeah, thanks, Leela. Let me first say happy International Women's Day to all of you, number one, and all of the women leaders around the world in all industries, and including my wife, by the way. So just, this is a celebration of you, not a one-day event, not a one-week event, but literally it needs to be permeating everything we do all the time. And we'll talk more about that, I think, as well. But when it comes to personal responsibility, one of the angles that I've been focused on, and I think really the pandemic brought this out, is not only what are you doing for yourself, which is extremely important. We all have to be a little selfish at some point. And I love the concepts around courage and fearless that Jacqui mentioned as well. But also we have a responsibility to support one another and to care more for others. And so what is our personal responsibility? What am I doing? What are you doing to care for others in this time of need? And so that really resonated with me. Again, I think the pandemic exacerbated some of those thoughts, but yeah, I think we'll touch more on this as well. So
thank you, Todd. And so I'd like to move on to what stops women putting themselves forward and what can we do to change that. And before I open that up to the panel, let's just see some of the comments that are coming in. Paul Morrison, good afternoon. Great to have you here. My favorite man, Todd Taylor. Richard, hello there. Great to have you here. Brad, happy Tuesday, everyone. Great insights from Gayathri. Like the languages and the trekking, something different for sure in this challenging world. Absolutely. And Danette, hi, Leah, delighted to be listening today. I chose to challenge myself to find the time to innovate and pursue pet projects. I love that. I know you've been doing really, really successfully with that. So well done, you. And guys, do pop your questions in the comments. Say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from today and what questions you have for our panel. I can see we've got about 23 people on at the moment. So let's have some hellos. Let me know where you're watching in from. So I'd open that question to Jacqui. What stops women putting themselves forward and what can we do to change that, do you feel?
Yeah, I guess, and this is a little bit of a broad brush, but from my kind of, if you like, control group of people that I mentor and coach, or who mentored and coached me, one of the biggest challenges seems to be that confidence factor in themselves. So I think many people have talked about this in general, this term imposter syndrome. So this fear that you're not worthy of the position, or you're not qualified, you're enough, etc. And I think a lot of a lot of women, when they look at opportunities, will say, hey, but I don't have this piece, or if they're 80% qualified, they probably won't go for the job. But what we really need to do is, and it's back to that word courage, but in a different form, encouragement. So what can we do to help others, as Todd said, to encourage them to go for those opportunities and to support them in taking those opportunities forward? I think that many women will have this little devil on the shoulder who's saying to them all the time, oh, are you sure you've got time for this? Or are you good enough? Or maybe there's other people who are much better. And it's like, throwing that thing off the shoulder and just encouraging women to take those opportunities when they come, and to know that nobody's perfect. Every journey, every transformation is zigzag. When you take these opportunities, it's not always plain sailing, but unless you stretch yourself, you don't learn as much.
Yeah, no, very, very true. I agree. And I always say this as well, until you step out of that comfort zone, you try something new, you really don't realize what you're capable of, and you're missing out on huge possibilities and opportunities. So thank you, Jacqui, for sharing. And Todd, what about yourself? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is as Jacqui said, this is a bit complex, but let's look at some facts right now. When we look at the Fortune 500 CEOs in the world, 7% are women. And that's a problem. That's a problem. So until we get to 50% or more, we have a lot of work to do. And so for me, this subject comes down to allyship, because we can't go from 70% to 50% and give that problem to women. It's people that look like me that are typically in the positions of power and leadership, board of directors, CEOs, CFOs, CXOs, et cetera. And really, they own this problem. They own the problem. So it starts with, number one, getting educated. How did we get here? Why are we here? And how do we go forward? Number two, it's acknowledging that, yes, there's a problem and we need to do something about it. And then finally, it's putting in the actions to do something about it. But allyship is so incredibly important, not just for women, but for every minority group. And so women seeking out allies, and by the way, there are a lot of allies out there who are willing and wanting to make a difference, willing and wanting to close this gap of inequality when it comes to women in leadership globally, by the way. So seeking out allies, and then it's up to allies to, put time on your agenda, put time and invest the right amount of time and resources to make a difference, to change the makeup and the demographics of our leadership today.
I like that. And we've got a great question, Todd, to support what you just said there, coming in from, it's actually from Katie Lee. So I can see, although it's showing LinkedIn news, I can see on my phone. So Katie, thank you for joining. Great to have you here. And Katie's saying, on the topic of allies, does anyone have any tips on how best to find and make the most of allies in the workplace?
Well, I'll start quickly, and then please, I'd love to hear from Guy and Jacqui. In terms of allyship, number one, you can have the courage and be a little bit fearless to just ask. Now, it might be in your leadership chain. It might be your direct manager. It might be your boss's boss. And if that becomes a little too nerve-wracking, I would suggest going diagonally in the organization. Seek out leaders in other departments, ones that have already made a visible difference in the organization, that stand for diversity and inclusion. And so I think you already can recognize that they're willing and wanting to engage. But don't be afraid to seek out a couple layers above you in a different department even as well.
Thanks, Todd. Ladies, would you like to comment? Jacqui?
Yeah, I'd say not just in your own organization. I think what Todd's already covered that off, but seeking allies out in industry and in other organizations and companies, and widening your kind of network is a great way to get support, encouragement, engagement. And I guess you can see these days, I think, who stands for allyship, whether they're posting on LinkedIn or whether they're active in supporting. I have just seen today just a wonderful set of posts on LinkedIn from many of my male colleagues across many of the organizations that I'm involved in who stand for allyship. And it really, I think approaching those people and asking, whether they can sponsor, mentor, or they can make suggestions on who can. But building this network, I think, is a key way to to increase your allyship and get that advice, support, and challenge actually to progress.
Thank you, Jacqui. That's great. And Gaia, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think that your allies need not be from your workplace. It doesn't even have to be from your industry. It can be from any industry. And I guess what most women should do better is getting yourself familiarized with the networking communities that are available, cutting across all industries, that are very easily available and accessible these days on LinkedIn, many different social portals, right? And find out what does it cost to get in there. And a lot of them have subscription costing, and there's someone who's managing those platforms, creating the connections together. And I guess when you network with people who are outside of your industry as well, they form really great allies, building you in probably very different skill sets than what you're doing today in your focus of your job scope. So that actually helps you to build unique skills that you need for your future career prospects, right? It's just one of my ideas that I'm willing to share.
Thank you, Guy. And I love that. Again, we can learn from one another. We want the allies, but we want people who can support us and lift us up. And Danette makes a great comment here. It's great to have allies, but it's also advocates that we need, people to champion, to support, and to lift women in leadership. And I know all of you, 3 of you, strongly agree with that. Thank you, Danette, for sharing. And we have a question that's coming from Richard for the panel. So, has the lack of a physical workplace made this encouragement harder? What can we do to change this? Who would like to take that or kick it off? Jacqui?
I think the lack of a physical workplace has had some positives and some negatives. I think that with us all working from home, those of us who, or not me anymore because my children are growing up, but those of us who have homeschooling or who are dealing with elderly parents, etc., it's quite hard to balance that investment of your time when you have a lot going on in the home environment, particularly during this pandemic. But on the plus side, actually, I think with some of the new digital tools, some of the networking has actually been quite impactful. So I think there has been more accessibility to some engagements than there perhaps was before. And you sort of think, well, can it really be that intimate like you were in person? But I've attended quite a few networking events that have used the breakout room facility, and actually it's like speed networking without having to leave the house. So you can really get to know quite a lot of people in quite an intimate way if it's sort of managed managed well. So I would say some pluses and some minuses. I don't think it's even Stevens both ways from my perspective.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree on the point of the networking. I advocate right now it's a great time to nurture your network and also to grow it, because it is easier to get hold of people now when people are working remotely. First of all, it's very simple to hop on a call for 10-15 minutes with someone and have a chat. Maybe someone you've not spoken to for a while, but keep remembering, even though you're not seeing people in the office day to day, take the opportunity to still reach out and talk to people, and people want that connection as well. I always say this, if you want to reach out to someone maybe you've not spoken to before, what can you do? And it's about building rapport, and how we build rapport is by finding common ground. And right now we all have common ground. We're all experiencing a global pandemic, and we're experiencing it in different ways. And people want connection. So use that as an opportunity to reach out and sincerely and genuinely speak to people and just ask them how they're doing. So thank you, Jacqui. That was a great share. Todd, Gaia, did either of you want to comment on that, what your experience has been?
Well, I want a big shout out to my brother Richard, by the way. I haven't seen his smiling face in a long time, so it's great to see the question. And honestly, I really would just kind of reiterate a lot what Jacqui said. I think there are clearly disadvantages. We all miss face-to-face human interaction. And by the way, without a mask on either, right? So we really, really thrive for that. But the tools have come a long way. And not only has the technology changed, but there are so many more people, including, my parents, who can actually use the technology now. So we have generations of people now who have grown up over the last year and a half, learning new technology, learning new ways to collaborate and communicate. And so I think there is great hope that we can take some of that momentum when we go back into the face-to-face workforce, that our network is bigger. We have cast a wider net. We have touched more people, and more people have touched us. So I think it absolutely can be an advantage if we continue to want to collaborate and work together and continue to broaden that network, as we've been forced to do over the last year and a half.
Yeah, no, like that, Todd. Thank you. Gaia, do you have some thoughts on it?
Well, I think we have to find newer ways to connect to people for sure. But I guess what I've been trying to do differently is I try to celebrate every win in a video format, with not just the team that I work with, the extended teams, and we try to have an evening drink together, not meeting each other for a year now. So that's very interesting. And I think what's something different that you could do if you are leading a team or you are working with extended team and your peers, and you want to be, you want to make them a part of you. There's something that I do is I created a birthday calendar. I actually have a calendar. I know when are their birthdays, and I try to send them something small, something sweet that makes people remember, that we care for them, that they're important to you, and that I guess a little care goes a really long way sometimes in the really fast world that we are in.
Totally
you,
agree with you. Thank you. No, that's great, and it's so true as well. Having people feeling that they're valued and that they're bringing value as well, and just remembering, particularly now when people might be feeling isolated because they don't have that connection. That's lovely. Thank you, guys. And let's just see, we've got a comment here from Paul. Thanks, Paul, and great to have you here. Great panel of speakers, incredible knowledge and experience. Question to the panel: with your current schedule, how do you find the time to support all of the people you do? I know meeting with Todd at Deutsche Bank a few years ago was a catalyst to a great period of success for me personally and professionally. Likewise, Paul, I would say exactly the same. So Todd, question for you. What do you think?
Well, I thank you, Paul. I like to say Paul is a brother from another mother, by the way. So I love Paul. I love everything he stands for and all of his wonderful, wonderful work in the UK and globally, quite frankly. So, while it's a compliment, I think, to all of us putting time on our agenda, I would say it's our responsibility. It comes with the territory of being a leader. You have to be responsible and responsive to the people. So that means putting time on your calendars, putting time on your agenda, just as you do staff meetings and the back-to-back meetings we've all have and currently have each and every day. You've got to put time on there for people. So you're doing those personal reach outs. You're doing the encouragement, the motivation, the inspiration to individuals, to small groups of people, to small teams. And I always think, the greatest leaders I've worked for are the ones who cut through all of the organizations and get down to the grassroots. Where are the people making a difference? The people on the ground with our customers making a difference, and senior leaders talking to them, not cascading messages through their leaders, but getting time with them, sharing the strategy, encouraging them, motivating them, and inspiring them.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, love that. And so, Jacqui, Gaia, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I'm happy to add to that. I think, as Todd says, it is a priority and it is a responsibility, but it's not a one-way. It's not a one-way process. I mean, life is all about human connection, and I'm sure Todd and Gaia get as much out of these engagements as you put in. So it's, for me, it's just one of life's enjoyments and pleasures of getting to know people and trying to help them. And it's all about giving back a little bit. But in every one of those engagements, I get lots back too.
Yeah, absolutely. Two-way process. Totally. We have to put ourselves forward to have that engagement and to encourage that connection. Thank you, Jacqui. Gaia, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I would agree with Todd. It's part of the role that you have to stand up for the people that are with you, and they're with you for a reason, right? And it's generally not about what they do, it's about what you're going to do for them. And I think they must be able to feel that in every aspect. So I guess over communicating is the new world right now. So you got to think of new ways of trying to keep them engaged with you and to share. And I guess where the balance has changed is, at least in my end, I get people to make sure that in the one-on-ones that they actually share with me what they did over the weekend or what happened in their family, or is anything bothering them before you go down to the subject that you want to deal with every other week. There's a million things, but I guess We need to create more of the people connection, and we need to remind ourselves as leaders, because you do have a lot of things that's on your plate that you need to achieve in that day. It's like a 35 or 45 things in a list. But I guess you just need to, you need to remind yourself, and I put myself a calendar every day telling myself to ask my team, how are they doing today and what exactly is going on, right? And I make it a point to just call them just randomly and ask how you're doing, like what's going on. So it's hard, but you've got to build that into yourself. It's just my sharing.
Yeah. Let me just comment a minute on what Gaia said, because Gaia is what good looks like in terms of our future leaders, by the way. So these simple things that she's putting in place, the birthday messages, the time on her calendar to make sure that she reaches out and says thank you to her team and, fabulous work here. I appreciate your effort over here. It doesn't have to be complicated. It does not have to be complicated. And so the more simple we make it, those saying thank yous, caring for people, reaching out, the better off we all are. And Gaia will be more of a successful leader, as she is already, by having her team support her because they know she supports them.
Nicely said. Yeah, that's so very true. So very true. Thank you. A comment from Danette. Great idea, Gayathri. My team have tried virtual wine tasting, yoga, and HIIT fitness sessions. Wow. We've even tried coffee and fika. Coffee and cake. It's important.
Amazing. You've done much more than me.
Some ideas here for everyone to take away. Collaborate, communicate, and contribute. It worked really well. Thank you, Danette, for sharing that. Mr. Jerry Banks. Hi from Shropshire. Really thought-provoking comments from the panel, honest and authentic. Great to see you here, Jerry. And so I'd like to go on to the next question, and that is, what can leaders and organizations do to drive inclusiveness in the workplace? Because research shows that companies with more diverse teams outperform those with a more homogeneous workforce. And there's research from McKinsey carried out in 2018 that shows that greater diversity in the workforce results in greater profitability and value creation. The same holds true at the executive level. And McKinsey found a statistically significant correlation between diverse leadership and better financial performance. So Todd, what can leaders and organizations do to drive inclusiveness in the workplace?
Well, how much time do we have, Leela? How much time do we have?
A minute.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. And, Paul and I have been through a lot of things together as well in our previous lives around diversity and inclusion. And I can tell you, having spent over 20 years kind of dedicated in the corporate industry to various facets of diversity and inclusion, there is no magic pixie dust that just makes it happen. It takes investment, it takes leadership commitment, and frankly, it takes a lot of hard work. But there are a few elements, I would say, that I've seen successful in the previous companies that I've worked for. And one is really kind of setting up what I would call the D&I infrastructure. And this infrastructure is a means of connecting the most senior leaders in the company all the way to the folks on the floor in every aspect of the organization. So you're touching everybody, you're including everybody to make a difference in D&I. And what this might look like is you might have employee resource groups for the various constituents that are really employee-led, employee engaging, and driving a difference on the floor itself. But it also then links to employee leadership teams. Again, employee-led, but leadership teams now overseeing the activities across all of these employee network groups, especially if you're running a global company. And then eventually at the top, you'll have executive support that are, by the way, named and assigned, if you will, to these various employee resource groups. And it may surprise some of you, but I was the co-chair of the Black Employee Leadership Council for years and years in my previous life. And it gets back to that allyship mentality that we can't expect people of color to solve the problems with racial injustice and inequality in the workforce. It's going to take people like myself and the folks on this panel to really drive that difference. So that's number one, is really this kind of infrastructure. Number two, what I've seen work again in the corporate world is a change in recent years around the HR process. So a very diverse slating process. So for every leader, in fact, you could take this to every role in the company eventually as well, that we will not start the hiring process until the slate of candidates, the list of candidates, is fully diverse and represents our employee base, represents our customer base. And so I think that's a big move. And then, finally for me is around communication. You have to, number one, talk the talk before you can even walk the talk. So from the CEO on down, every leadership message, every newsletter, every town hall, you have to reiterate the importance of diversity, the importance of inclusion, the expectations that they have on the entire workforce and leadership team to support the strategy of diversity and inclusion. But again, it takes people who look like me to really drive the difference. And I've always said there's a reason there are not employee resource groups for people that look like me, because we don't need it. We have innate privilege, and we need to provide that privilege and opportunity to everybody else.
That was short and succinct, Todd. Jacqui, what are your thoughts? Jacqui, can you hear me?
She cannot hear you.
Jacqui, can you get you?
Jacqui, are you there?
That's it. Jacqui, can you hear me? Gaia, did you want to comment on that? I just repeat the question.
All right, so
organizations to drive. Yeah.
Yeah, so perhaps I guess I will have to agree with Todd. You need to find people who will walk the talk. I'm very thankful. I guess I have many leaders in my life who really did walk the talk, and who have been, working with me to cultivate the pathway together. And I guess where any leader can make an impact is, though many HR organizations today are featuring the drive of women leadership, the drive of females, inclusion and diversity, and so on and so forth. But I guess there are definitely challenges in many trying to incorporate these changes. I think what any leader needs to do is to make sure, at least for my end, I make sure that I take a look at whether there's a balance in the team. And if there's no balance, I guess we need to take the lead to inform that this is not the pathway to go, and let's figure a new plan together. And that has worked well for me, at least in the last the last 24 months. So I'm very thankful that in various territories, I've personally hired female are great individuals, coming from much diversified experience than I do, or much more longer in the industry than I do. So I'm very thankful that they decided to work with me to help me to build a vision together. So I guess you need to make people understand, how do we come together to build that intention, and you've got to instill that every day, not only just in your workplace, but also externally with the folks and in the type of people that you want to work with. So there's still a lot of work to be done around that area. I can't tell you more, I guess, Leila. There's still a long way to go.
Yeah, and it's a learning process, right? It's a learning process for everyone. But I think what you're doing already is fantastic. It really is. And Jacqui, just to reiterate the question, what can leaders and organizations do to drive inclusiveness in the workplace? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, sorry, my internet was a little bit jumpy there, so I missed a little bit of what Todd and Gaia said. So apologies in advance if I recover some of those areas. But I think you've got the angle from company policies and language, and I do think I heard Todd talk a little bit about this, the importance of networking and employee resource groups, but also specific actions around pay equity, around creating that measurement system. So many of the companies that I work with are actually, creating big programs and targets. So making sure everybody is actually trained in conscious inclusion. What does it mean? And that, that's a lot of discussion around language and behaviors and biases that we all may have. Because this is a big journey, and I don't know if it's already been mentioned, but sponsorship is critically important, as well as mentorship. And lots of people sort of often ask, what's the difference between sponsorship and mentorship? But sponsorship is advocating for your sponsee, if you like, in the environment, not just this kind of coaching relationships. It's absolutely quite different. And finally, role models. Where are the role models in the organization? Those are critically important. So people, if they can see it, they can be it. And I think that gives that gives confidence to the next generations of people coming up through the workforce.
Thank you, Jacqui. That's great. And just to share some of the comments that we've got coming in, Wilma, great to see you here, and thank you for sharing. Completely agree with Jacqui in how giving and sharing comes right back. Plus, we've onboarded interns into our business during lockdown. Love what they bring, and yes, we've made cocktails. Fantastic. And Paul, message to Jacqui: when you have been at the top of your profession like you have, how do you keep yourself dreaming and reaching for more?
Nice to hear from Paul. It's interesting that we all know and love Paul. He's a legend in his own right. So I don't say I've been at the top of my profession, Paul. I think I still have a little bit of ambition there, as Leela would say. I guess I keep dreaming about what I can do to the world to make it different and better for my 3 daughters. So, when you're looking for that mission and motivation, I don't have to look too far, but from my own backyard with the 3 girls, I want this country, the working environment to be more equal than perhaps it was when I was in my career. And also I'm really hoping that longer term, and Todd talked a little bit about this earlier when he looked at the percentage of leaders running Fortune companies as a small percentage. In the UK here, we have a very, very small number of female chairs. So people chairing companies, there's about 5 out of 100 in the FTSE 100. But when we look at the FTSE 350, there's something like 15 or 20 in the whole top 350 companies. And that's, I'm on that journey as a non-executive director and now a chair of a couple of committees and a deputy chair of a charity. Is, I would like at some point to kind of break the glass ceiling a little bit on being a chair of a large listed company here in the UK.
Nice, very nice. Thanks, Jacqui, and keep inspiring, Paul says. Thank you, Paul. And Jerry is asking, would you agree that diversity and inclusion can create a competitive advantage? Different perspectives and experiences are essential in the global marketplace. Todd, I'll give you that one.
Well, I think it absolutely creates a competitive advantage. And it's very simple to me. When most of us, when you look at the companies we work for, whether it's a product company, a services company, our customers are very diverse, especially a lot of your followers here, Leila, are working for global companies. So our customers are diverse. How can our employees and our actions and our beliefs and our policies and our, fundamentally what we stand for as companies not reflect our customers? And this is why, again, I think the data, as McKinsey suggests, when you have a more diverse leadership team, a more diverse board of directors, you become more profitable and that's what the data suggests. And you're going to grow your company. You're going to acquire and have access to more customers easily easier than you would if you're not diverse. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, but as you build up that diverse leadership team, it will give you a better chance to succeed and absolutely a competitive advantage. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Jacqui, Gaia, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just comment that I do feel that we were perhaps quite privileged in the companies that we've all worked for, because they were truly international, and we have had the privilege of working with many different nationalities and cultures around the world. And there aren't that many industries that operate in the same scale as the technology industry in as many countries in the world. I know Gaia, Todd, and myself, the three of us, and Leela as well, the four of us actually worked for a period of time at Hewlett-Packard, but Hewlett-Packard operated in 166 countries around the world in 5 major lines of business. So you sort of think, gosh, we've had the experience of working with so many different cultures around the world. It's just such a privilege that we've had in our industry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Thank you. And bring us on to the next question. What has been the impact of the global pandemic, would you say, on the workplace? I know we've touched on this a little bit earlier, but what else in terms of what have you seen? So Gaia, I open up to you.
Well, I think people get discouraged much quicker. It doesn't take months now before people get discouraged. It takes days. And I think they easily get influenced by negative ions. Like, naturally in any workplace, there's always something good and something bad that happens every day. But I guess people take the negative ions much, much more seriously and infuses into them much quickly. Because of the factor of whatever conditions that you are in right now, dealing with the pandemic situation, the condition behind it, whether it's with your family, whether it's your extended families, your friends, your environment, culture, everything plays a part, I guess. And I think we, as any leader should be, we should really do the step up of trying to understand, at least for myself in Asia Pacific and Japan and China market, every country has completely different style and culture and very different way of embracing a challenge like a pandemic. And one beauty is everyone has to deal with it, right, at some point in the same frame. So that makes it easier. So I guess you need to find ways to get them influenced in many different ways that's positive in their own cultural perspective. I guess that's something that I'm still not very good at it. Honestly, I'm still doing one or two things differently, trying to understand how to motivate the situation. I try to read a lot of cultural maps and books to understand how do we fix those thought processes and communications around it, as we are all built around the sensation of being a great communicator, being more international, being more diverse. I guess it sometimes is like what Todd said, is as simple as trying to feel, if you live in China today and in such a big city, you're by yourself in that 2-bedroom, how do you feel about the situation today? So you need to put yourself in that box, in that frame, before you actually get on a call with that person and say, before you say something, you go like, so how did it go? Where did you go? What did you do? Did you have your dinner? How, it's as simple as that. And that's really difficult in a global marketplace that you're in every other day. But I think, I guess we all need to do better in this area. That's just my thought process about the pandemic right now.
Thanks, Gaia.
Back to you, Leela.
Thank you. Todd?
Yeah, thanks. And Gaia said it very well. I think the other thing that comes to mind that I've just seen and witnessed, even in the academic environment that I'm in, is that there's more time for people to think about others. And I've seen this with senior leaders in a lot of my previous companies on LinkedIn and other places. They're reaching out. They recognize, as was mentioned earlier, that their employees are now working from home, managing children, managing elderly parents, and trying to get the job done. And you as a leader, if you don't maximize your empathy and try to put yourself in their shoes, you're going to get no results at all. Your performance is going to really deteriorate, I think, across the employee base. So this pandemic to me has focused leaders on empathy, focused leaders on caring for employees, focused companies on creating new policies, new HR processes to be more flexible and, again, empathetic to the employees. So I think this is a good thing. Now, the challenge and the question will be, as we get out of the pandemic and we get back to kind of business as usual, will we continue to carry this mantra forward around caring for people first and foremost? And will that prove to be a successful strategy for leaders, in coming years?
Thank you, Todd. And Jacqui?
Yeah, I'd like to re-emphasize that focus on well-being. Certainly across all of the organizations that I'm involved in, it's been a massive focus of the management teams, the teams in general, because this has been a particularly difficult time for almost everybody. People are losing their parents, through the pandemic, this isolation. It's been a really challenging period. What I would say is it's probably been the biggest dramatic shift in digital transformation that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. So whilst these technologies have been around for some time, the pandemic has been the tipping point of forcing us all into learning how to use the technologies, because we just have to in order to get the job done. So I do think that most of the organizations that I have any connection with would have said the first 6 months of the pandemic, productivity actually in a bizarre way increased because people were at home and they were working long. What else was there to do? So they were staying online too long, too late, etc. So we were trying to reverse back out of that balance between making sure people can switch off at home and they're not just feeling like they can just put all of their time into work. I also think from a kind of negative perspective, we perhaps have gone backwards on equality during this period of time, and I think we're starting to see some research out there about the types of people who've been more distinctly affected than perhaps some of the knowledge workers, as I say. But it has given a big new focus and emphasis on what can digital do to create flexible working and cause organizations to think differently about how they can accommodate different styles of working. So for example, on some of the organizations I'm involved in, they'll say because people are homeschooling, they're choosing to work in the evenings rather than during the day once their children have gone to bed. And it's just it's sort of opened up everybody's mind about, well, do we really need to be in the office 5 days a week? I know that most organizations are revisiting their real estate strategies, but I do think one other thing that has suffered has been innovation. So whilst we can be quite productive in working in this way, we are not as innovative, because those personal water cooler conversations, that coffee that you weren't expecting to have, that kind of creative engagement isn't happening as much.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what I'm hearing from all of you there is, a big focus on empathy. I think that's a huge thing, understanding where other people are at, what's going on for them, what they're having to deal with. Well-being, again, is a huge consequence of that. Is, are we still taking care of ourselves and our mental health? What is the impact of that? And the balance is key, and I think we're all guilty of it. It's easier, it's more difficult to separate work and home now, so it's easy to just get into that thing of staying on the laptop. to being mindful of that, and then also connection, so reaching out and checking in, seeing how people are. So thank you for sharing that. And just some comments that have come in. So Justin Campbell, hi there, thank you for joining. I think it's about empowering people to build their skills and opportunities to make them relevant to the company outcomes. The technology industry is a greater place to grow all people to build better solutions. I like that. Does any of you want to comment on that?
I'll comment on that if I can, Leela. I guess, you know, quite often people will ask me, Jacqui, how come you're on the board of a bank, a chemicals company, and an engineering company? How can you move between those sectors? And it's because technology transverses all sectors. So, you know, it's back to that opportunity to, you know, technology can take you into learning lots of different things in different industries.
Yeah, like that. Fantastic. Really good point. Todd?
Yeah, just real quick for me, and it's great to see Justin as well. You know, probably the smartest person I ever met. Listen, I think technology is great, and what he says is around empowerment. So, you know, the best leaders I think of today are not telling their employees what to do, how to do it, when to do it. You know, they're not being so prescriptive. They're actually, to his point, here's the outcome I'm trying to achieve. Here's the result I need, the business results at the end. You tell me, because, you know, you and the team are going to be smarter than the leader typically in any problem solving event. You tell me what you need. What resources do you need? I'm going to empower you to get the job done to achieve this result, this expected outcome. And that tends to be so much more successful. And as Jacqui said, technology is a great enabler to that. But just from a leadership style and a mindset of empowering employees versus, again, being so prescriptive on what to do, how to do, is, you know, can be transformational.
Yeah, thank you. And another comment from Justin here at Todd. I think the pandemic has allowed people to innovate much faster and without corporate rules around them. Post-COVID, this will continue in my view because the outcomes have been so good.
Yeah, that's what we all hope. And it's not just business outcomes, but I would also the behaviors, again, the leadership styles, the engagements, the empathy, the caring for people. You can actually care for people and get great business results and be successful. And so I think there's always been this historical view that if I spend all this time and energy on people and caring and investment, you know, it's going to take my eye off the business results ball. I would argue it's just the opposite. And I think we're seeing that. I think Justin's pointed that out as well.
I'd like to comment on that because that's a great point Todd's making about the purpose. And I've got a couple of examples of that actually this that happened in one of my organizations. So, you know, at Tesco Bank, they have very large call centers that you know, obviously have a lot of people operating in them, and they didn't have a lot of home working at all prior to the pandemic. But the technology team, that whole mission and purpose of making it safer for people to work was a big driver to the innovation that got people working at home inside 2 weeks, which, you know, previously they would have thought, gosh, this would have taken them 6 months to do. And again, another example of that would be gift cards. So when everybody went into the lockdown, one of the things that the bank team innovated on, and its ground up innovation, was to create a gift card that would allow people who were shielding or isolating to buy an online card so that people could do their shopping for them. And subsequently that migrated into gift cards aimed at children's free school meals, so they could buy food, you know, instead of having you know, not being able to get their school meals from school because they weren't at school. So I do think this purpose piece is very, very important to you know, to getting people to the right outcome.
Yeah, very true, very true. Nice, thank you, Jacqui. Gaia, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I'm just very simple. I guess what I've been trying to do is during the pandemic, I especially in Singapore, if many of you know, life is really fast, and you know, it's all about getting things done. You know, there's an SLA around everything. And I used to joke, and I used to tell a lot of my American colleagues, have you been to my country? Like, you're going to see that this traffic light will stop in 60 seconds, and it will. There's never a time it's ever broken down. It will never go, because that's how Singapore has been built. And I think this pandemic has really taught many of us in this country, because it really slows you down, and you start to appreciate people around you much more. I even stopped sometimes to give a delivery guy a can of drink, or I even stopped to say, how are you, which I don't usually do in the fast world that I've been. And I have to admit it, because you're running for your life. You leave at 7 a.m. You come back at 11 p.m. You don't have the time to really have a conversation, right? And now I even know the guy who collects the garbage from my place. I know him by his name, and I give him a bottle of water when he comes in the morning. And I actually think that somehow you become a better person. This pandemic actually makes you realize that the EQ is, like what Todd say, will never fail you. It will always make you a better person. And I think you need to keep reminding yourself in your own activities, before you tell someone to do something, you got to do it yourself. And I think that's something I'm trying to do for myself, and it really made me feel very good that I even know their names, and I appreciate everyone during this pandemic who came to deliver something, and it's not an easy time for anybody, and I guess I think we're still in the situation, but it's beautiful, to learn about people all the time.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, beautiful, lovely. Thank you, Gaia. Richard, need to drop. Thank you to the panel and Leela for such an insightful session. So with that, I'd like to ask you, did you have any comments you'd like to leave our listeners and audience with for International Women's Day? Any one piece of advice, a takeaway that you've got for them?
There's no advice. I guess I would tell everyone, just be as humane as you can. I think that not only it's not about the job, it's not about being in leadership, it's not about, you just have to be a human and try to understand someone. And I think it's not going to be easy, but if you do that every day, somehow you just get better at it, and that builds everything else around you, and people just stay with you, or they want to stay with you wherever you go, for the person you are. It's not exactly about anything else that revolves around it. And this is just my parting words. So thank you everyone for being with us today. Thank you.
Yeah, Gaia, that was very well said. And I'm a big believer that good things happen to good people. And so, as Gaia said, just a little bit more humanity as a focus and priority, I think we'll be much better off. And the only other thing I would say is, never stop being curious, never stop asking questions, never stop learning. And if we can all do that as well, I think we'll be better off. And especially when I'm thinking about International Women's Day and the support to that community, maintain that curiosity, continue to learn, continue to grow.
Thanks, Todd.
And I guess I would add to that, always take the time to help others and give back. It's a little bit like karma is true. It does come back, but it is so worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. Thank you very much, guys. A few more comments popped in. Charlotte, hello there. Great to have you join us. Fantastic panel discussion. Thank you. It's been great to have you here. Thank you, Charlotte. Wilma, wonderful people and purpose-focused session. Thank you very much, panel. Take care. And Paul, a fabulous interview. Thank you. Nice to see you again, Todd, Jacqui. Thank you, Leela, and I hope to meet you, Gaia. Awesome. So I would like to say a huge thank you to all of you, to Todd, Jacqui, Gaia, for joining me here today. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear your insights and invaluable shares and just different perspectives on leadership and what we can all do better. So that's been really, really great. So I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and look forward to speaking again soon. And to everyone listening, if you have listened to this live or you're listening on replay and you still have comments or questions, please do pop them in the comments, tag one of us in, and we will be able to come back to you and answer any questions you have. And if you're not already connected, then do reach out and connect with Todd, Gaia, and Jacqui on their LinkedIn profiles. So in the meantime, I'd like to leave you with, as I always say, continue to build your influence, make an impact, and create a lasting, compelling impression by showing up as the best version of you. And I look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week. Thank you, everyone.